Even during dog days of political inactivity necessitated by the coronavirus pandemic, the struggle for control of the ruling Jubilee Party continues. The party's succession plan remains an overwhelming priority for all factions seeking relevance amid internal coup allegations. Deputy President William Ruto's allies with dogged determination are opposed to President Uhuru Kenyatta's handshake partner. But how will President Uhuru Kenyatta pursue the handshake vision and head off internal rebellion and the unfortunate political position of his party? That is the subject of our discussion. The hashtag on Twitter is NewsCompass, and later we'll sample some of your feedback. We are joined by the former Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Honorable Farah Maalim, by way of Skype here on the broadcast in regard to that, of course, development in the country. Good evening, Honorable Farah Maalim.
Good evening to you. How are you? Do you hear me?
Yes, I'm getting you. Is the sound okay on your end?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
The sound is very okay on my end.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us here on the broadcast. Your time is appreciated. In regard to the development here in the country regarding the ruling Jubilee Party, of course, the idea has been the concern Kenyans had, and of course they have been deeply skeptical about the conduct of the political establishment, is the lack of ideology and policy. The problem in the ruling Jubilee Party that we continue to witness day by day ever since the handshake, and how will President Uhuru Kenyatta address that problem internally?
Well, there has never been a question of ideological persuasions that separated different centers within the multi-party setting in our country since 1992. If you look at the manifestos of all the political parties that were there, they were literally identical. And it was very common to find a political leader here who attends a liberal international caucus somewhere in Lisbon, Portugal, and then attends one for the Social Democrats, and then goes and attends also a conservative one, like the Tories or any other party that holds globally. So there is that ideological persuasion is lacking within the political setting of the political establishment in the country. Having said that, I think Uhuru will try and deal with these things in the manner that political centers have always traditionally dealt with any dissent, which is also not going to be that easy, because we know for sure when you're in your last term, you don't hold that much authority in the party. We saw it from Moi's time at the end of his 2 terms in 2002. He literally had no control over the KANU as it was then. The likes of Saitoti, Raila, who was the Secretary General, and everybody abandoned them and basically went and created another vehicle for purposes of cornering power through NAC, and that's how Kibaki got into power. And then we also saw that Kibaki wasn't too keen on this duo who came to power later on, that's Uhuru and Ruto, to take over the place. I think he had his own other calculations, but that never worked also, because once you're on your last term, you don't control anybody that much. Now, having said that, it's also got to be understood that Ruto has been used pretty much as the man to do all the dirty jobs for Uhuru and his team. So it's slightly different. Whereas Moi was literally responsible for all the good and the bad during his time, and everybody blamed him for it. And even when they were fighting Uhuru in 2002, they were saying, we want Moi must go out, which essentially he was not going to run for the presidency, but they were saying that Moi legacy plus his own choice must go. And in the case of Kibaki also, it was more or less the same. The deep state had their own issues. But this time here, I don't know who is the deep state, to be honest with you. And I don't know how much that can be possible, because Ruto has been running the system while Uhuru, by and large, more or less looked like a figurehead before. So the divorce in Jubilee, the separation of the different centers of Jubilee itself is going to be bloody, and it could turn in any direction.
Oh, okay.
I pity my good old friend Raila Odinga.
Okay, we will come to
because he has gotten caught up in this thing himself. If he had stayed on his own,
Okay, we will come to the ODM factor, Raila Odinga, and of course, the sort of what appears to be the predator approach by Ruto allies in targeting Odinga and seem not having more attention on the president who has a handshake partner in Raila Odinga to pursue a vision. However, you mentioned the aspect about, for instance, the Conservative Party, the Tories in the UK, or the Labour under Jeremy Corbyn for some time now, but he, of course, has left the scene after the defeat in the general elections on the 12th of December 2019, and the Democrats and, of course, the Republicans in the US. However, owing to what's transpiring at the moment in the ruling Jubilee Party and the political status of the NASA coalition, which is unhealthy, does it again reveal the real rotten state of the domestic Kenyan political arena in the country, that after every electoral cycle, then the next electoral, before the next electoral cycle, these parties and coalitions are not holding up?
But that has been the case all through. That has been the case all through. Although this time around, I think, well, you can cheat some people all the time. You can cheat some people all the time. You can cheat all the people sometimes, but you cannot cheat all the people all the time. So the by and large, the rank and file of the Kenyan masses are beginning to call the bluff right now. They don't see any difference between one person who's in the government and another who's in the opposition, or two factions of the government itself. So I am looking for, and then the coronavirus is going to create a very powerful paradigm shift, not just in Kenya, but in many countries in the world. The politics and economies will never be the same. I mean, Corona has done a hell of a lot of a tsunami in terms of it's going to be, in my opinion, upset all the traditional formulas of running of transacting politics and economics in the world, in the globe, and we are likely to suffer a lot because, for example, we are not able even to generate ordinary revenue in excess of 1.4 billion, 1.4 trillion. Oh, that's what dollars. And as it is right now, thank God we now have this global, what they call respite, or the global G20 has reached a decision that they are not going to, all the developing world will not be required to pay the interest on, plus whatever they were paying before in terms of loans. We were going to be paying 460 billion out of that. So we're going to be left with something, at the very most, about a trillion Kenya shillings to run this, the public sector, and at the same time to do development in this country, which is going to be impossible, even without coronavirus. So there are a lot of things that are happening right now that is really going to separate. It's a question of, and in any case, this is not a time the country should be having internal intra and inter-political parties wars. This is a time when the whole country must pull together in a single direction, in trying to address the issues of Corona, in trying to address the lockdown, the curfews, and the rest of it, because let's face it, the economy is shrinking. It was shrinking in the beginning because of the bad debts we had and the fact that we never became the favorite destination for the foreign direct investments in the past. And a lot of, there was a flight of capital out of the country. Now it's compounded with Corona, which we don't know up to now the apex, because I don't know how bad it's going to be in another 2-3 weeks' time. So I think the masses of this country, there is a possibility for a tectonic, what they call movement or shake, that will essentially render irrelevant whether it is Jubilee or one faction of Jubilee or the other, or whether it's opposition or ODM or all these political parties who basically, or NASA. There's going to be that shift, in my opinion, and I don't know how it's going to conduct itself. But it's important to understand this is not the time to be playing politics, and I think whoever is advising both sides here, in this case within the Jubilee itself, is making a serious mistake, because one group is trying to change the status quo, from the status quo ante to a new status quo in terms of the dynamics, inter-party dynamics. The other side is trying to resist that, fight it very hard. So in both cases, I think there is a problem. The country is not pulling together in a single direction against the most formidable enemy that has ever been there in modern history, which is the coronavirus itself. So those are the kind of things that, in my opinion, will determine and will create the new narrative for the country for the future.
Okay, all right. You have mentioned very important points in regard to, of course, the handling of the economy in the country here, because there were accusations of mismanagement and mishandling of the country's economy in regard to the begging bowls by the government going for the cheap loans from the Chinese and the Saudis, which, of course, do not impose as tough restrictions as IMF or the World Bank. But given your observation of the Deputy President William Ruto's accusation, I beg your pardon, of constant rejection in the party, of course, talking about the likes of David Murathe, the opposition chief, Raila Odinga, Francis Atwoli and company, who are fiercely opposed and deeply critical of his political behavior in the country. In any given situation, has President Uhuru Kenyatta told the DP indirectly, like him or lump him, Odinga is here to stay, because that is the focal point of the attention of the DP, William Ruto?
Well, that he has said it in as much words. I mean, politics is not just it is expressed, it is implied also. So the implication has been that, like it or not, your time is up, and I don't intend to leave you behind as the successor to my own period of time, for whatever reasons. I mean, some of us believed right from the beginning that Raila Uhuru wanted to inherit himself by maybe making certain fundamental changes into the constitution and maybe coming back like the Medvedev put in kind of a scenario. But whatever the scenario is, whatever the future of this country, whether he's going to be revalidate himself back or revalidate his worth, it is crystal clear that him and Ruto will never be together in the future. Let's face it, the JB marriage itself, or Jubilee marriage itself, was a marriage of convenience to be able to fight the ICC cases and also to, for lack of better words, to be have that an unholy alliance in all the riggings that they did, because the 2 terms that were there. Rest assured, everybody knows that these were not elections that were fairly won by Jubilee, but you see, they were all there in the crime. But so I can see a situation in which Uhuru has already made up his mind in how, whether it is out of a massive magnanimity of saying, look, we've done what we have done. It might have been as bad as we did it, but I don't want to leave this country as bad as we read down ourselves. I want this thing to change, and that could be a good thing. Everybody has an opportunity to change and rewrite history one more time, and he has the capacity to do that.
But how okay, Honorable Farah, to just pause you.
His own backyard.
How will President Uhuru Kenyatta develop that courage to tell the DP that, when it's in public knowledge, in public, of course, archive, that it was a 10-10 affair, that we shared indictments, charges of crimes against humanity at the ICC, and throw the DP William Ruto literally under the bus?
Well, but you see, that's every action, a politician, a savvy, consummate politician always knows when he has to do certain things and call a spade and call the courage. He has not been able to do that for this period of time. But he has given all the intentions and the signals that he wants to leave behind what probably will amount to some kind of a legacy. I don't think there'll be such a powerful legacy. But if you can get a new constitution into the country, in my opinion, in which he allows Kenyans not to go for a presidential election anymore, because this has created ethnicity and a lot of problems, negative ethnicity. And we basically have a parliamentary system of government in which even the prime minister just runs for a constituency. And at the end of the day, the prime minister is accountable to the country on the floor of the house. And he says, okay, this is how it is. If he wants to have a certain revalidation himself because of the changes that are made, because the old constitution will probably have, he's not going to change the term, it's not going to be a term limit, a removal of the term limits, no. It's going to basically change the whole system and have a different system. I don't see anything wrong with him or anybody else, again, seeking a mandate on side things for purposes of trying to, for whatever reasons, whether it's going to be political selfishness on his part or it's going to be because he wants to right the wrongs that were there before, by also bringing into and incorporating the people who he feels legitimately had the role for the last 10 years to manage the affairs of this country, but who were basically rigged out by a system that he had led himself. But it takes a certain element of courage to come out and say, look, we know what we did.
Okay.
And we were having a government in which there was not going to be anything a death because it's 50-50. I think Ruto.
All right. We, of course,
the first 5 years, Guru had a very ceremonial role for all those years. So to say that, look, I'm throwing you under the bus because it's a fair deal. It's a fair deal. So I intend to leave behind a legacy, and this legacy is going to be based and be forthright in everything. Because even the BBI, we don't know exactly what is going to be the content of BBI. Is it going to be assigned to revalidate or fortunes?
All right, Honorable Farah Malim, of course your time is appreciated, but we seem to be having a glitch here on the broadcast. Hopefully he will be joining us back here on the program with the discussion that pertains, of course, the aspect about ideology, policies, ethno-majoritarian politics in the country and democracy are sort of the promise made by the ruling Jubilee Party in 2016 in ending ethnic balkanization in the country. That, of course, set-piece speech by President Uhuru Kenyatta on the 10th day of September 2016 when the ruling Jubilee Party was formed after the folding up of more than 10 parties at the Moi Sports Centre Kasarani here in Nairobi County. We'll be getting back to Honorable Farah Malim shortly after the break here on the broadcast, and later, before we finish up, we'll be getting the global reaction, the global numbers of the coronavirus pandemic in the world in regard to John Hopkins University study, where the number has now clocked more than 2 million across the globe. But equally, there is, of course, hope on the number of recoveries that continues to equally grow exponentially across the world. And, of course, the update from CNN, BBC, and the global reaction to the World Health Organization cutting funds by the United States of America here on the program before we end. And that's coming up short after the break here on the broadcast. Stay tuned. Thank you so much for joining us here on the broadcast and keeping us company here on NewsCompass. Of course, we cherish your company. Now, we're still talking to the former Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Honorable Farah Malim, who is standing by. Of course, we have managed to make up the technical glitch here on the broadcast. Honorable Malim, thank you for staying with us here on the program. Now, there is the tough task that awaits President Uhuru Kenyatta, because the leverage at the end of the day lies with him, not as the Jubilee Party leader, but the person who leads the institution of the presidency, which is a symbol of national unity. Two quick questions. How does he unify his party amid all these uncertain times in regard to, of course, ensuring that he immunes it from collapse? And then there is the BBI politics underneath what's transpiring in the country that has given the president the power to pursue a vision which appears to be blurred because of internal rebellion within his party. How will he address these two important, significant issues to the Kenyan people?
I think he's damned if you do, damned if you don't. He has basically thrown in the gauntlet and basically challenged or dared his deputy and the people with him into a duel. So he cannot go back on that. He just has to try and finish that job, and it doesn't look like it's going to be that easily finished. So for him to be able to, he has, in my opinion, he has very little authority within the parliamentary part of the PG of Jubilee. You can see that Ruto has a significant, majority, and has already completely taken over his backyard in terms of the members of parliament. He's trying to depend on the party right now, using the people who are in the party who are also holding certain executive authority in the country here to make certain changes in the party, and even that is not going down very well. So I think he has a problem. He has taken on a fight that is looking increasingly difficult to win, that also he cannot abandon, because then it shows the weaknesses, and that's going to be the end of him. So it will be important to see how this thing unfolds. BBI, as far as I'm concerned, is also having it's on its knees. Coronavirus has complicated things. There can never be the mass rallies and all those that were essentially programmed before that, including in the backyard of Uhuru, Ruto, in places like Nakuru
and other parts of Rift Valley, Kalenjin Rift Valley. So we have a rudderless ship called Kenya right now, in which the ruling party, which is supposed to be steering this to a destination and calling ports, which cannot do that because the captain is not in charge of the crew. And the captain and the crew are pulling in different directions. But at the same time, you have this very powerful storm in the sea, because when you have a ship and it is threatened by a storm, in the very least, you should have the crew pulling together in one direction. But here you have the crew and the captain not pulling in the same direction, and the storm is there. It's a sad situation, both for the country and also for the government of the day today. And it'd be difficult to understand or even to predict how it's going to unfold now. But for sure, it's going to be a bloody in the sense that it's going to be a bloody political contestation in that place, which I don't know how it's going to unfold in the end. Because if we did not have the corona, then of course you could say the traditional way in which power, the what you call the deep state manipulated things, and it's always happened in this country since independence. But today you have 60+% of the population living before the poverty line. You have a lockup in which they are not able to get their businesses. Businesses are closing, industries are closing. If you go to the CBD in the morning today, you find this is a ghost house. It looks like some of the places where the Western, what you call the Wild West movies used to be shot before, because you don't see any people there. And that also reflects in the pockets of the masses. And you know, in all the urban settings, you can rest assured crime is going to spiral out of control right now, because people have no food in their homes. And we don't see anybody who is making all the efforts to try and see how that can be mitigated. We don't see a president or his deputy or the government, because they're all there pulling in different directions, and they're fighting their own political wars, but they should all be fighting the enemy, the common enemy now, which is more powerful and more daunting than any enemy we have seen in the history of the modern world. And so these are the kind of problems that are there, and that will have an effect. And by the way, at the end of the day, the buck stops with the head of state.
All right.
It stops with the hood.
Okay.
But it's very sad.
Okay. Given that, and when you look at the sort of Kenya's democratic setup, the ethno-majoritarian democracy sort of style, because President Kenyatta and his DP William Ruto came together at the Afraha Stadium in 2013 to form the Jubilee coalition, which of course ended months of political uncertainty years following the ugly specter which engulfed the country after the 2007 presidential elections, which were disputed. If they walk apart in this case, owing to what's transpiring at the moment and the unfortunate political posturing of the ruling Jubilee party, will Kenya descend then into shackles of political violence? Because that has been our precipitating point, the stemming point of all the political violence in the country after every electoral cycle.
Well, I think if there's going to be any violence, it's not going to be an ethnic-based violence, I can assure you, in the future in the country, because you can rest assured the president's backyard, which is the mountain region itself, is not in support of him. His deputy has probably got more support than him in that place. And there are sections of the Kalenjin Rift Valley that are also not that much in support of the deputy president. I don't see them literally locking steps up with him, you know, and literally helping him and supporting him to the man. No, there are certain areas, because of the manner in which he ran politics for the 2 consecutive parliamentary elections we had before, in which a tradition has been established, in which he gets rid of all those ones who are in the know and brings in a team of greenhorns and rigs everybody in and uses absolute and brute, what you call, power and force. And there are those who feel that, no, we cannot have him again. So the consoling factor here is that we might not have that kind of an ethnic divide. We will have Ruto getting the support of all the ethnicities you can imagine. We will have Uhuru probably doing the same thing. And we will have probably Luo Nyanza and other places having their own issues with Raila and the way he has transacted politics this time with a handshake, because there are many of them who are saying, what has he brought it out other than a few development projects that were undertaken in Kisumu and those areas. And then, of course, the rest of the country also. There are people in different camps. Then, of course, there is the masses of the poor people who are going to be affected by this coronavirus. This is a political base that can easily be tapped by any person who claims to be a revolutionary and says, let's get rid of the dynasties. Let's get rid of this, what they call powerful economic, political elite we have in the country.
All right.
Let's deliver this country back to the common people in this country. Since independence, we've never had that. So that is also a possibility. That is, when you see the stuff that people like Miguna are saying from wherever they are, rest assured that there's a whole groundswell of young people who cannot find jobs, and the hundreds of thousands who left the universities, who do not care what clan or tribe or part of the country one comes from, who are easily going to come together as Kenyans, and who will be easily exploited for purposes of a certain another, what do you call it, some kind of a revolution, popular people's revolution. So like I said, COVID is going to change the new world order in this place, not just in third world poor countries like Kenya, but it's going to change in the most powerful economies in the world. Today, as we are talking, America and the Western world are not those liberal democracies, human rights, and all these things, the multilateralism. There's more multilateralism in the so-called autocratic states of China. China is now sending equipment and support to all the corners of the world. America is getting isolated fully and literally looking inwards. And so all those things, there'll be new power arrangements in terms of the global powers. It's no longer going to be, America is not going to have the monopoly it used to have. Europe, as you know, it also will have a problem. So it's going to change. And the third world countries who are poor will also experience powerful changes because coronavirus and the consequences of coronavirus, which we have, by the way, not even started.
All right.
Now, because you can imagine if you have a lockdown in Kenya and other African countries in the region.
Okay.
Total lockdown. Yeah.
Okay. Well noted points. Of course, notwithstanding the consequences that will come after or in the aftermath of COVID-19, America, of course, partially isolated because of the role under Donald Trump, who is the president, in regard to, of course, not only COVID-19 pandemic response and misjudging the situation, but equally walking away from binding international treaties, the Paris Climate Accord 2015, Iran nuclear deal, and in Europe equally, which there seems to be a groundswell of activity. But coming back home in regard to, again, as we finish up on the discussion on final question, there is the aspect of the BBI. Hold on. Hang on, Farah Maalim. Let me just put the question to you. There's the aspect of the Building Bridges initiative here in regard to, of course, the sort of sensible and mutually advantageous position it has led the country to following the handshake between Kenyatta and Odinga. However, will it be the cushioning point of the aspect of for or against, us versus them, and set Kenya to the path of political prosperity post-2022?
Well, to be honest with you, I know we're going to go through some seriously very dark days. I don't know how long those dark days are going to last, both in terms of economics, in terms of the ravages of this of the disease that's there. Remember, we now have 200 and something. Italy started the same way. Spain started the same way. Every country started a couple, 5, 10, 15, and everybody more or less dismissed it as, and then again, it blew out of proportions. Right now, we have 200 and something cases. We only have those 200 some cases. Those are because of the ones who are quarantined and who are tested. Imagine when there's a general public testing in the whole country. My assumption is that it will go into thousands and thousands, and will probably run out of, and it has the capacity to bring down anything. Because when that happens, if countries, powerful democracies and powerful economic power centers like Europe and Spain and Italy and US are affected as badly as they're affected, you can imagine that happening in a country like Kenya. We just lose it all. So what I'm trying to tell you is that I do agree with you. I don't think there is going to be any talk of BBI anytime soon.
All right.
I can assure you, for a number of reasons. Because one, whatever we had in mind or whatever people had in mind about BBI, I supported it myself for the very assumption that it's going to have a pure parliamentary system, which is yet to be seen whether it's going to be there. But of course, the effects of COVID-19 is the only countries that have come out of these things very fast right now and more or less have contained it are China, Korea, and the other countries, the Asian countries that were seen as autocratic before, Singapore, and the Liu Yu was seen as more or less a dictator. But those are the countries that have come out of it. The liberal democracies that were there still have their own issues to grapple with.
Okay.
And as you put it, we as in Africa, we have a problem. We have a serious problem. Once this thing spread, the good news is that we do not have that mass of a powerfully big elderly population in our country ourselves with conditions.
Okay.
Because the fact that Africa is young. The 10 to 15 to 35 are probably 70, 80 plus 85% of the population.
All right.
So most of those ones, 80% of those ones, will just experience it as some kind of a cold and get over it without any treatment. The problem will be with the elderly people and the people who have underlying conditions. But even with that 10% or 5% itself who are going to be affected, we will have a serious daunting problem in the continent. So to talk about anything, you can only wait until you see how the ravages of corona is going to be contained in the country. And then, and only then, will we be able to look at the situation. But the way I see it myself, I think there's going to be powerful dynamics, powerful tectonic movements of people's persuasions, and by the way, for the first time we are seeing in
briefly
the country now, ordinary citizens coming together and chasing policemen away. You see what I mean? And then you also see the dark side of that authoritarian police brutality that is there. And although the government has tried to come up with some, and thanks to the social media and the modern, in the manner in which you're able to capture all these things. Okay. So there are a lot of things that are happening in the country, and we will see how those things unfold. But I see it as fairly grim in the future, I can assure you.
Asante sana, Honorable Farah Maalim. Thank you so much for joining us here on the broadcast, and thank you for, of course, giving us your assessment in regard to COVID-19 impact, of course, on the ruling Jubilee Party crisis. Asante sana, and have a lovely night.
You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Honorable Farah Maalim. We are not yet done. So let's take a look at the global outlook in regard to the COVID-19 pandemic and the impact it has had on the global issue in regard to the developments that we have. The numbers, as you can see on your screens, 2,069,098 total confirmed number of cases across the world. But this is not updated as per what you will be seeing here on the dashboard from Johns Hopkins University. So the exact number is 2,101,164. Total confirmed number of deaths across the world, 140,773. Countries or regions affected appearing on your screens, 185. So when you come here, then you have the segmentations in terms of the countries affected by COVID-19. Out of the 2,101,164, the United States of America accounts for 641,166, followed by now 5 European countries, Spain, Italy, Germany, France, and the United Kingdom, of course, all in Europe, which is the epicenter more or less now until it's shifted to the United States of America. Then China comes position 7 with 83,403, and it was the epicenter of the coronavirus pandemic, which broke out in the city of Wuhan in Hubei province in China, despite, of course, the response by the Xi Jinping government in China to contain the virus, and they now are registering virus from outside China than internally. Then you have the aspect about the mapping aspect of the coronavirus pandemic. So as you can see on your screens, when I play this, from the onset and the starting point of the coronavirus pandemic in Wuhan province, this is captured by CNN. So when I play here, you will see how this is going to be totally changing. So from the onset, the attention was on China. Then you can see how the other parts of the world are becoming red or will be shaded in red by the end. And this, of course, is as per the timeline, as you can see, that continues to run down on your screens. And the source is Johns Hopkins University Center for System Science and Engineering, as you can see on your screens. Then we have another one here, which is equally important, covered by the BBC as per the timeline in regard to the COVID-19 pandemic across the world. And this, when I play, as you can see, China had topped the world, followed by Japan. And Japan's case was very special because it was the Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's misjudging of the Princess Diamond ship, which was to dock in the port city of Yokohama. Then Thailand, South Korea, Taiwan, which are countries that have managed to handle the pandemic well. America had only one case by that time. This was the 22nd of January. Afghanistan, Albania, Algeria, Andorra had all no cases at all. Now Algeria is leading in Africa in terms of deaths. So when I play here, as you can see on your screens, look at how the timeline is fast changing, and this is now by end of January, then we are in February. The total cases above 40,000. Then by the end of the timeline on the 12th of April, you will be able to see how this is likely going to be changing in totality. And until we come to the 12th of April, updated of course, and the number is now past 300,000. You can see how the timeline is running fast. And of course, as we first approach 1 million mark, there we go. Then that is still within April. Then that is now where it ends. So we have 2,096,780, which is of course in regard to COVID-19 pandemic as of April 2020. A day, of course, less by the confirmed cases, which are now about 2,100. So when you also come here, we take a look at the flight radar in regard to the coverage of the imposition of flight bans from the European Union to the United States of America, which seems that there are no flights over the North Atlantic into the United States of America, but busy airlines in respective continents, in the United States of America, of course, and in Europe and in Asia, which appears to be back to normalcy, and the pause in production is now lifted. Factories are now working. But when you zoom into the African continent and take a closer look at the Horn of Africa region, there seems to be only one flight now, as of now, on the Kenyan airline. So when you click on that, it's Qatar Airlines registration from registration, country of registration, Qatar, registration number AF-AFF, Airbus model A330-243F, which is, of course, the manufacturer. That is the illustration given by the flight radar. And when you see, and you can see, it's still moving, QTR 8772 towards, of course, Qatar, in Doha, Qatar, presumably from Nairobi County or Nairobi in Kenya. Then across the airlines in Ethiopia, when you come down, when you come up across Ethiopia, absolutely only 3 flights. You can click on that. Then it is Bole International Airport. Then you can click on the next. It's this is a flight from Nairobi to Addis Ababa. Then you have this one, the next one. It is an Ethiopian cargo flight that jetted in Ethiopia at Bole International Airport from New Delhi in India, of course, presumably carrying medical supplies for the country that is also affected by the coronavirus pandemic. So thank you so much for joining us here on the broadcast from the onset. Of course, we appreciate your company. Asante sana. And of course, a lot of coverage that continues across the country in regard to COVID-19 pandemic. And this is where we come to an end here on the broadcast. And 234 is the magic number. We are about 13 days before the month of April lapses, and the projections given by the Minister of Health, 10,000, we are short by that, by 9,766. And given the number, and of course the projection so far, it's questionably what many Kenyans are deeply skeptical about, on whether the questions are not answered or simply the right questions are not put so that the people in authority will be able to answer in regard to the coronavirus pandemic in the country. And that's why news is, of course, different ever since the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic. And the global community has equally been impacted in regard to the shutting down of financial markets, from London to Milan, to Frankfurt in Germany, to New York in the United States of America, Mecca in Saudi Arabia, Nairobi in Kenya, Joburg in South Africa, New Delhi in India, Beijing in China, Singapore, talk about Sydney in Australia, have all been impacted at a time when the global community is, of course, uniting in response to the COVID-19. But the concern is the role played by the United States of America. Donald Trump at the White House castigating the World Health Organization, cutting in funds of the World Health Organization. Africa likely to be impacted, and why America seems to be falling short of the expectation in terms of providing global leadership. Or in any given case, a scholar did put, Professor Samuel Huntington, the making of a new world order. I am Ayub Abdikadir Abdi. We leave it here. We'll see you next Thursday. But on Monday, as normal and the culture, New Day will be starting 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Coverage on the transport sector, the impact of COVID-19 on the Kenyan transport sector. And thank you for joining us here on the broadcast. To the fantastic director back there, Eddie Kavai, to my cameraman, Sule and Ngetich. We'll see you next week by the grace of God. Asante sana. Good night.